I feel like punching somebody in the face right now. Why do they say that electronic music takes no talent? It obviously does take talent. We, as Gen Y, seem to be embracing a new way of creating music. It's called electronic music production. And in the MP3 era, we have a new way of doing things that previous generations did not. And they are mad about it. Anywhere from software such as Reaper, LMMS, Fruity Loops to Logic Pro, even to the new electronic music apps for iPhone such as Sutin Music Studio, GarageBand, and Nano Studio allow others who are interested in making music to experiment in creating their own masterpieces and share them with the world, even without setting foot on a stage. Everything is going digital and music is changing. Today's music industry is quite different than the traditional platforms of yesterday. The showcase of music is changing as well. So why are people so upset about electronic music? The older gens don't seem to appreciate it, nor get our passion for it, and there is a reason why. Sorry to start by playing the devil's advocate, but in many ways, it has become easier to get your foot in the door than it did yesterday, because the tools to create music are more accessible to people than they were before. I've been doing electronic music for a few years now, and have been doing synth productions since the 2010s, and the first songs that I composed were on an iPhone that cost 15 to 30 bucks. That may sound ridiculous compared to the way things used to be. Back in the 1980s, you would have to hire a recording studio for $12 an hour, not cheap back then, to produce music. It would take about 30 hours to do. Some people went in without having a clue as to what they were doing, but back then it was the only option. Also, if you wanted to showcase your music, you would have to hire a professional or get in touch with MTV. Nowadays, if you have a laptop, a pair of earphones, and the internet, you can download freeware such as LMMS and free virtual instruments to plug into the software. I don't mean to upset anyone, but it's become that easy to produce music and get it in front of the eyes and ears of an audience. You can very easily get into this new music industry because making music has become more accessible than ever before. And on a side note, anyone can slap a piece together, but it still takes talent to make a truly unique electronic music masterpiece. The advantage of this new way of doing things, truly talented artists can now get their foot in the door without having to go through the mainstream media or the mainstream music industry or pay musicians to play for them. Many talented artists, if not most of them, would have had no chance of getting their foot in the door in the old music industry the way things were. Back then, you had to know the right people. You had to be at the right place at the right time to have the knowledge you needed to get your foot in the door. Not anymore, folks. This could be one of the main reasons why the older generations are so mad. This type of production cost them an arm and a leg to produce and get it on cassette back in the 70s and 80s. No joke. They say that the mainstream music industry has no originality anymore, and I would have no choice but to agree with them. Many of today's famous pop stars and celebrities aren't original. It's become more about hype, propaganda, and idol worship. It all looks and sounds like the same thing, the same tune, same dribble, same style of singing. Yet they play so much of it on the radio that it somehow programs its listeners to actually think that this is real music. Real good music, that is. Much of it is pretty lame. Much of it is pretty shameful, as many of today's pop stars are not role model material. The way things are going in today's mainstream press tells us that we're going downhill. I love electronic music, but they have a point. The mainstream music industry is so full of garbage right now. And in spite of everything going electronic, I see no real diversity or individuality. It's more and more of the same thing. And though there are some horribly produced tracks out there that fall under the genre of electronic music, does this truly mean that electronic music takes no talent? Think about this. If you use electronic instruments to compose a song that you can dance to, that you enjoy listening to, that others enjoy listening to, then you can produce electronic dance music. And yes, there are a ton of artists out there that can produce amazing EDM. And if this is true, then where can we find the good music? Let's think outside of the box, shall we? Let's step out of the old way of thinking and onward to the new. If you want to find good music, it's not going to be found on MTV. Sorry, folks. Those days are long gone. We've got to think outside of the mainstream radio. You know what they play there? It's the all-famous pop star music. As a matter of fact, we've got to think outside of the mainstream press altogether. Nowadays, we have the internet. Let's not forget that. And most of where I have found the good music is on the internet, on sites like YouTube and music websites such as Reverb Nation, Bandcamp, and other places. So how do you find the music that you like? Type the genre in the search bar and you will get a million hits. There is no limit to what you can find. Through this, I have discovered some of the most original and beautiful masterpieces created by independent artists. And these artists aren't even showcased on the mainstream radio. You're not going to find them there. But here are some of the best electronic music masterpieces that I have found. You can check out the name of the artist in the link below. This goes to show you, though the mainstream music industry tells us that we're going downhill, the independent music industry, or rather, the new music industry, is telling us otherwise. So why should we judge an entire genre of music based on what the mainstream media is trying to put in front of us?
You don't need to physically learn anything. You can just read it and do it and take your time. There's a certain execution needed for physical instruments that is just harder for some. Producing EDM doesn't necessarily require that much talent, but it does require serious dedication over many years and a passion for music. Just look at Deadmau5. He's been producing for over 8 years to get where he's at today.
Why does it matter how it is produced? Shouldn't talent be based on the choices that the artist makes, not how hard it is to execute? One thing I like about electronic music is that you don't have to practice a technical skill involved in playing a physical instrument. However, I don't think older musicians who play traditional instruments truly understand what goes into electronic music production. Therefore, they don't respect it, nor the effort that it takes to make it. I've heard some poorly done tracks done in a bedroom that sounded awful. I've also heard some great sounding electronic music tracks that have brought tears to my eyes that will take you out of this world. And many of them have been done by independent artists. Talent is talent, whether it's coming from a guitar amp or electronic music software. It still requires a human brain to produce it. People need to understand that creating electronic music, just as any genre, also takes knowledge of music theory, and a lot of it. Getting into any form of music production is hard work, and I can attest to this. And as an electronic music artist, I have even created my own synths and sounds.
People like Deadmau5 came forward and said what we've suspected all along, and all the knob turning that goes on at a live EDM show is a shame. The refreshingly candid man behind the mouse mask claims that if you tech savvy, you could learn how to do his show in about an hour. It's just pressing play. And that's all there is to it.
Quoted by Michael Mann, by the way. You can read the rest of his blog via No Talent is Required to Perform Electronic Dance Music. A lot of people may be clueless at DJing, like this guy Michael Mann. But there are also a ton of amazing artists out there. Let's take a look at this one. And let's not forget the launch padding. And also, in response to this comment, you constantly talk about how horrible EDM is, but it only makes you look like you're on your high horse. You have no reason to hate it except for the fact that it is new. Even if you don't like it, you don't have to be like your grandparents telling you that you shouldn't listen to rock because it's the devil's music.
What? I don't want to be a bad girl. I don't want to be naughty. I want to be a good girl. I want my halo back. Can anybody see my halo? Can you see my halo? Huh?
Sure, turning knobs is easy, and pressing play on MP3s requires no effort in and of itself. But do you know about the effort that was put into creating that MP3? Do you really think it's that easy to create an electronic masterpiece that will be truly unique and resonate with an entire audience? I'm here to say that it is no easy feat. Here is why. Though dexterity to play a physical musical instrument is not required to create electronic music, it has its own unique challenges that make different from a guitar band. Deadmau 5 draws every note. I will keep this as simple as possible. Anybody can throw together a 4/4 kick drum beat, synth leads and a few stabs and or chords and have something that resembles an electronic dance music song within a couple of days. But it takes special knowledge and talent and practice to create a song that truly resonates with an entire audience. And of course, a piece that is unique from the rest. These types of songs are hard to make, and that's why people will always notice when you do it. But this takes time and learning to master those skills and arts. You need to learn how to develop original sounds, i.e. not presets, and combine them effectively. You need to learn to write rhythm tracks with a compelling original groove. You need to be able to arrange a track skillfully enough to whip a crowd into a complete frenzy. If you are writing songs, you also need to know how to construct good verses, choruses, and mid-eight and incorporate it into your style of music. You need to spend a long time developing your own sound, or you'll just be sounding like everyone else. You need to be able to mix all of these ideas into a beautiful three-dimensional soundscape, and above all else, your music has to have a soul. Developing these skills may be hard to master at first, but after a few mistakes, you'll eventually get it right. And as far as the songwriting aspect is concerned, it will be challenging to write great melodies that will hook your listeners, but it can be done with a creative mind. Also, arranging the music and every aspect is a whole other thing altogether. Some people have careers based on that one thing. Then there is also the technical division. You need to learn the instruments of the electronic music software. You need to learn how to design your own sounds. People make a living doing this as well. Next, there is the compression and processing, EQ, and adding effects to your music such as delay, chorus, reverb, and so on. This is a completely separate thing from everything else. Then there is the mixing and engineering. This is to ensure that every note sounds good together, checking for the right timing and spacing between notes. No mashing or clashing. Lastly, there's the mastering, which is to ensure that everything has the right volume and quality. Yeah, it's not easy, but you can learn it. But this requires a good ear and a mind that is ready to soak in some knowledge. I grew up listening to classic rock and even classical music. I've seen music evolve over the years, and now I have progressed towards electronic music. I grew up with both traditional and digital styles. I appreciate both. Who am I to argue which is better? I doubt that will change anyone's mind. The amazing thing is that when you combine the two, it only enhances the beauty of it. This simply sounds heavenly to me. So why love one and hate the other? Why not love them both?
As a classical musician, I spent hours and hours and hours a day doing simple exercises to learn how to get better hundreds of scales. What felt like weeks of long tones, whereas there isn't a whole lot of that in electronic music, I picked up Ableton, and within 3 days I kinda had something that sounded like I wanted, whereas it took me years to get anywhere close to that on an acoustic instrument. I suspect that for every kid who makes shoddy techno because he thinks it's easy, there's an equivalent guy who brings in an acoustic guitar to parties and plays Wonderwall. The hope is that eventually they'll learn to grow past that.
The idea that some guy who is awesome with a guitar being better than an EDM producer who writes a 96-track song on a DAW is ludicrous to me. Though it may be true that traditional musicians are extremely talented and have brought other traditional musicians to play songs for them and help them mix, chop, and edit into a new beautiful masterpiece, can this truly mean that some guy who can play 100 licks on a guitar is better than an EDM producer who can write and arrange his own music? For those of you dissing electronic musicians as having no talent, I have a question to ask you. Can you compose entire lyrics, melodies, arrangements, guitars, synths, pianos, bass, and classical instruments within an entire song by yourself? If the answer is no, then you have no business deeming electronic musicians as having no skill. Think about this. Electronic musicians have to think about every aspect of the song that they are creating, instead of just one or two aspects. I would ask that you would respect our genre as well as we respect yours, because it truly takes effort to create. And the work that is put into it is so much more than just mastering one or two elements of a song. And to top that, there is so much you can do with electronic music software that it's pretty hard to learn it all at once. It may take a while to understand everything. Also, I would like to point out that if there is a specific sound that you have in mind, you will need to know how to create that sound. And that's pretty challenging at times. I've done some experimentation with music myself, and oftentimes I've come out with a whole different sound than I originally intended. The other fact is that you will have to know how music is put together in order to create a good song. You will need to at least know something about music theory, and once you know it, the application of the information is the fun part. I will go so far as to say, though electronic music does not require a physical skill to play a traditional instrument, you can experience more of a variety of sounds within the electronic music genre and create even more complicated compositions.
Music took a hard nosedive when Napster came on the scene. Real musicians not making money brought forth all the garbage music that's cheap to create. They don't have to hire session musicians, everything's done electronically. The younger generations don't know what real music is, and they don't care. They're content with the crap electronic music. I'd like to see a renaissance, but I'm afraid we're too far gone with a younger generation coming up that has no thirst for anything of real substance.
Don't compare EDM producers to lame dance pop artists. It doesn't take much but the magic money hose to help them. As long as they are well funded and have their backup system, they could care less and put minimum effort in what they do. Though I would agree that the mainstream music has been shown to be cheaply made, this certainly doesn't speak for the entire genre of electronic music, nor the entire upcoming generation. I believe that music needs a change. And that requires for us to step up to the plate and make it happen. We need to actually provide something of real value to give to the next generation. It's not the fault of the younger generation, it's ours. And it's up to us to make that change.
Well, in my case, the criticism is justified. I turned to electronic music because I didn't have the patience to learn to play an instrument.
These so-called artists who turn to the electronic music genre because they think that it's the easy way are usually horrible anyway and need to have someone else to do the work for them. To be a truly unique electronic music artist, you will have to produce your own songs and have a creative mind and great skills just as in any other genre. Some may say that electronic music is so easy to produce that even a child could do it. Let's put them to the test, shall we? Can they do it? The moment when you take someone who disses electronic music and set them in front of a computer to attempt their first EDM song, they better get a reality check. Be sure to subscribe for more great music and stories right here on the channel.